This video is a visual deep dive into poster design in Japan and what makes it so unique. I recently took photos of all kinds of posters while I was in Japan. Ads, events, info signs, and I'll break them down to show you 8 ideas you can steal for your own designs. Japanese design has always felt kind of fascinating and mysterious to me. It's known for being super minimal and maximal at the same time, which is wild, and it just has such a unique vibe, totally different from what we used to. So when I finally got to visit Japan, I couldn't not look at everything through a graphic design lens. The streets are honestly a visual overload. I was constantly stopping to take pictures of posters, signs, menus, everything. And I split this video into a few categories of different kinds of posters, and the first category I'm gonna go through is food posters. Of course, the most essential thing that we have. That includes restaurant menus, street signs, and any ads related to food. So the first poster is a beautiful combo of English and Japanese typography. Simple colors and fonts, but very bold and messy layout. Kind of reminds me of punk posters or flyers. In terms of communication, I think it would be more effective to show the food more clearly because that barbecue stick is barely visible. I guess it's fully relying on the type, which might not be clear for foreigners, considering that it's in English as well. They probably want to attract foreigners. Other than that, I think it's a really nice poster. I like a good punk style. This is Japanese signature style calligraphy, even though it's imitated in a font for Latin alphabet. I guess it's also for foreigners. But it's very loud and expressive, but actually they use this calligraphy style not only in touristy places, but pretty much everywhere. So it's not that artificial as you might think. And even though it's a font, not the actual handwriting, I think it still looks very impressive. This is very touristy again. And even the layout reminds me a lot of a Western poster. It's full of Japanese stereotypes. Clearly it's only for the foreigners. Not really authentic, but it still works. The layout is balanced. The hierarchy is established, so I don't have any major problems with it. Other than that, it's not really authentic. This is a lot more interesting and original. I think it's a good example of organized chaos. It shows the skills of maximalism, filling almost the entire space, which is a hard thing to do, yet keeping it coherent and not too overwhelming. Another thing which is really interesting that is very symmetrical, which is not typical for Japanese design. You're gonna see it later in other posters. So this is rather an exception, because usually it looks too unnatural and boring in a way, but here, just because of the amount of details, I don't know what that is, but it doesn't really look boring. It looks static. Okay, there's no movement here, but I wouldn't say it's boring. And the reason why they achieved to keep it coherent, I think, because of very limited color palette, and the font style is the same everywhere. This is even more authentic and original. It's handwritten, which is beautiful. The raw and messy brush strokes are such a treat for the eye, honestly, especially in our fully digitized world. I mean, it's a pretty rare thing to see. Something very local, traditional, and cozy. And this one is pretty simple. It's rather on minimalist side, and despite its very subtle and pastel color palette, it's still pretty bold and clear, which is good for the purpose of this poster. I think that's because of the size of the picture, which is so big and eye-catching, just because of what we can see. And nothing too loud around it, nothing too distracting. The text doesn't distract us because it's not too bright or big. This cat pudding is the center of attention here, as it should be. Another very eye-catching poster with handwritten typography. Photography makes it very clear. Just look at how much effort they've put. Those outlined characters. Not only they wrote this whole text by their hands, but the title just consists of only outlines, which is much harder to do yourself, but it looks impressive, what can I say? And those cute drawings of chicken and curvy lines. I love those adorable little details. This is a very well-structured, well-organized menu. They definitely made the best use of the grid. It looks kind of like a website, but not too overwhelming, probably because of the size of this poster, and we don't feel the pressure to see all of it at once. We can take our time to navigate through the poster and to look at the section that interests us the most. And it's not too overwhelming, again, because of the very limited color palette. As you can see, it's only the shades of brown, black, and dark red color, and the white background, and that's it. The hierarchy is pretty clear, not too many layers to organize the information, and the same fonts being used, maybe except that little one with the red outline, but just because it's so little, it's not too distracting. So yeah, overall I wouldn't say it's overwhelming. This is more clean and easy on the eyes because of more breathing space around. I love the layout. It's not standard and predictable, and I love how the images are masked into those interesting abstract shapes. I mean, that's pretty creative. This is a good example of maximalism. As you've noticed, it's McDonald's poster. It's harder to achieve it this way because of the bright colors, and it's not only 2 colors, it's at least 3 or even 4. But they managed to do it because of the consistent illustration style, the same typography, a rhythm, like a lot of repetition across the poster of different details, and probably this yellow color is present everywhere across the poster. But this is very not typical to the Western posters of McDonald's because there is no clear focal point. It's kind of split into 4 sections, and 3 sections are equally important, whilst here in Europe and in the US you would probably see 1 focal point of 1 burger, and if they want to show more than one, the other burgers would be smaller, and they would try to highlight that main one with some gradients or other creative tools, but not with traditional illustration like they've done here. So it's quite a different approach, I would say. And this one went a bit further. Not only is the typography handwritten, but there's also a hand-drawn illustration of a map or an animal. I don't really know what that is. I think it's a map. It feels very local and unique. And take note that, again, they rely only on the text to convey the information, not that much on the image. There's no pictures of chicken, so probably not for foreigners who doesn't speak Japanese. Another hand-drawn and handwritten menu poster. Very impressive, I must say. I can imagine how long it took to organize all of that, and it's really well organized. It definitely works. Clear blocks of text, limited colors, again, consistency with the same font, the same size of the text and images. This is what makes it visually balanced and not too messy. Pretty easy to navigate for the eye. And this is a very similar style, but here the information is divided into different levels. I mean, it was divided there, but here we have more dramatic difference between the smallest size and the biggest size. So the hierarchy is more clear and it looks more expressive, like every time when I see characters that big and in the form of brush strokes, it always looks very loud, emotional and expressive, and I think it's just incredible. Okay, and the next category is gonna be the cultural posters, which are mostly posters that I saw around museums or in museums, the ones that are advertising the exhibitions or any kind of events that are happening in those spaces. So just expect that category to be more creative, and it would have more English language because it's targeted for tourists as well. This is a really interesting collage-like composition, split into 3 parts with overlapping elements. I would say it's a good combination of traditional and modern styles, and this one is really dark, which is not typical for Japanese poster, but I think it works out really well here. It adds a lot of drama, and I love that pop of color of bright red. Overall, I would say it looks very Japanese, authentic, despite the color palette. Very elegant, traditional, well-organized typography, even though it might look like chaos sometimes. And Japanese characters, they almost look very similar to the illustration that we can see on the right, just the shape of them. To bring all the elements together, they've used that bright pink color for the background, which I think was a really smart decision because it adds the contrast, and it also adds the contrast in the style. It makes it more contemporary and fresh, and at the same time traditional and classy. I love this kind of contrast. This is a very clean and well-organized poster. Really good example of minimalism. It has clear hierarchy. It's not too loud, but at the same time we appreciate the beautiful shapes of those elegant letters. But placing the type on the edge, like right on the edge, is usually a pretty risky thing to do. But here somehow it works out and it doesn't feel off. So I can only say amazing job to that poster, to the designer who made it. This is again very clean layout. The characters are used like a pattern or a texture, and we can see a clear focal point because all the characters around it look kind of like a frame to emphasize the focal point even more. So I think it's a beautiful job done in that sense. This is a very unusual layout. They left the central space blank, which is a strange thing to do because this is the space to put the most important thing. It's an optical center of any poster, just right above the geometric center. Whereas the text on the top doesn't seem to have enough space, so it goes even beyond the canvas. But it's clearly done very intentional, just to emphasize the theme of this exhibition, I guess, just to depict the link between two worlds, very different from each other. So they wanted to emphasize the distance between them. This is the example of the characters being used in geometric way. So you can see that here they are not like traditional calligraphy, they are very geometric and organized. This is a beautiful and playful blend of English and Japanese languages. I love the main title, even though it's so simple. I believe Helvetica is chosen for a reason. Here, not only is it clear for international audiences, but it also serves as a visual element because it's very geometric. I guess it emphasizes that avant-garde style that they wanted to embrace, and we can see it by the color scheme as well, which is based on primary colors. The shapes of the characters are also very geometric, so everything is coherent in that sense, and I love that contrast between playful and chaotic shapes of characters but still geometric, and very organic shapes on the image. So I think this contrast works really well here and they match each other. Here again we can see the visually striking contrast between the oil paintings, which depict a lot of organic shapes and something traditional, and the bold, vibrant red color for the background. Characters again look more like an illustration here because of their organic shapes. So it's clearly a mix of past and present, and it feels very unique and creative here. This one's very flat and graphic. The layout is freeform, not following any strict grid. All the elements are kind of floating in the air, yet they are still connected by the way how they are placed. We can clearly see that consistent rhythm. The choice of images looks very fun and eye-catching. All of it makes this poster very playful and friendly, I would say. So yeah, I really like this one. Again, the layout is not really typical to what we used to or what we would expect. The images are overlapping, the text is partly placed on the image, yet the visual flow is consistent and balanced. It works out really well as an experimental and modern poster, which is what it is, because it promotes the exhibition about something futuristic, technology and stuff like that. So I think it makes sense. This is again a beautiful mix of modern and traditional, and the thing that represents the modern style here is of course the neon yellow color, which probably you would imagine wasn't accessible in the beginning of the 20th century or whenever those paintings were made. This is very different from everything else. As you can see, this circular shape composition makes it stand out right away. The digits are used as aesthetic element, and serifs make it elegant and classy, and everything looks classy classy, to be honest, here, except the layout itself, because it's super playful and messy in a good way, very creative. Here, characters used as abstract shapes. You wouldn't even recognize them as characters at first. They're just creating this beautiful pattern. And also we can see the texture of paper or the ink. I don't really know what exactly that is, but it looks very analog in that sense and very crafty and traditional, which I think it's a beautiful thing when they want to promote something authentic and traditional, and I would assume that that's the case. I don't really know what kind of exhibition they mean, but hopefully it aligns with the style of this poster. Otherwise, I would definitely have it in my house on my walls. It just looks gorgeous, in my taste at least. Okay, the next one, I love the asymmetry here. It would be so easy to go with a standard central alignment, but they made this shift on purpose to make it a bit less predictable, which is a good strategy, I think. It looks a lot more creative and captivating. Even this blank space on the right doesn't look that we have to fill it in with something. So yeah, this is a good example of very elegant Western typography. And this one is pure maximalism. Like, some people may not love it. It has a lot, definitely. I love the color palette, to be honest. And even though it's maximalist and full of details, they did their best to keep it consistent. And how did they do it? They just used this red color across the entire poster. They repeated it so many times, so it looks very, very balanced and coherent. Maybe I'm not a fan of the font that they used to write in the center. I don't think the outlines work here that much to highlight it. But other than that, the background or the images on it kind of look psychedelic to me. So I think it's a beautiful work overall. And again, notice that they don't highlight any particular focal point. There are at least 4 or 5 focal points here, and that's one of the key features of Japanese design in general that I've noticed. This is a very Art Deco style with a modern and Japanese twist, because the layout is very asymmetric. Also, the clear, bold black outlines make it more flat and probably a bit more Japanese, because they really like to use this tool in many posters to make everything 2D. And I absolutely love this one. Just look how experimental it is. The text doesn't look like text unless you keep looking at it for long enough. And this trend of highlighting every single piece of text in a box, it's clearly used as a decoration, as a pattern. It makes it look very modern and geometric. So yeah, it kind of looks very trendy to me. And also playful, because a lot of the things here have been used just for aesthetics, and I appreciate that. This is probably even more experimental because of the random abstract shapes and the same trend they used, placing every piece of typography in a rectangle, but the colors are just a bit more dramatic and they remind me of avant-garde artists of the 20th century. So it's not particularly Japanese looking. I would say it's like a mix, but it looks very modern, like modernist style modern, not contemporary. Here, again, we don't see any clear focal point, and yet it works out really well. It's very clean and easy on the eye. The only thing I'm not really sure about is that script font on the right. The ascenders and descenders, those strokes, I think they are a bit too much, too overpowering. Sometimes may make a poster look a bit too cheap, or maybe that's just my associations by the fact where I usually see this font in some cheap, ugly ads. So it's really hard to pull it off in my mind. But here it's more or less okay, but I would maybe reconsider it. And this one is really minimalist to me. Again, it's a beautiful combination of Japanese and English language, and I love how consistent everything is. Thin lines are not only in the font of the main title, but also everywhere across the poster. It's not that symmetrical as it may look on the first glance. Like, as you can see, the right side of it is empty, but it doesn't look empty. I think that's because of the black background, because when the space is black, it doesn't look as empty. In our mind, we can imagine that something dark is hidden there. Whereas if it was white, it might look a bit off rough and too empty, we would want to fill it in with something. So yeah, that's a great job, I think. Okay, about this one, I love how they managed with very few visual means to make it look interesting, because gray is the most boring color and still it doesn't look dull and boring here. And I think that's because of the delicate and detailed illustration, which is hand-drawn, really beautiful and really nice to look at. We immediately drawn to it, really admire those skills. And also this pink flower kind of stands out here next to everything gray, so this gray color doesn't ruin it at all. Looks very delicate and classy. This one is a little bit more messy, but I think they used a very clever way to connect everything together with that yellow abstract shape, which probably imitates the ripped paper. I love the details at the bottom. They don't look too chaotic, or I mean a little bit chaotic, but organized chaos. Yeah, I don't think they need to change anything here. This layout is very predictable, kind of Western style. Maybe not only Western, okay. But the only thing that is not really predictable is that blank space in the middle, right under the picture. This just adds a little bit more breathing space to the poster, considering that it's very minimal and it's done intentionally to emphasize the image here. And what makes it more Japanese is the vertical placement of the information. At the bottom, the vertical text, of course, and the columns. Yeah, this is more Japanese style. And here, I love how dynamic it is, the sense of movement, and such a high contrast between the fun, vibrant neon yellow background and dark, dramatic black and white images. Plus the outlined typography for the main title makes it even more fun and bigger contrast compared to the images. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting combination. This is a very intriguing layout, not something typical, even for Japanese design. The eye is moving in kind of like a spiral direction. Again, no clear focal point, but for this purpose, it works out. It's giving very artsy and experimental vibe. The composition here is more expected to what we used to, because it's very central, almost symmetrical, with some additional information on the borders, but the amount of elements here and an excellent job in making them work together is very impressive. I love the maximalism here. And again, there is no clear focal point. There are kind of two main titles that are competing with each other, but it depends on the intention. If they needed to highlight one of them, I guess it didn't work in that case. But if it's a typical Japanese style poster when they don't really want to highlight one title, I think it works out really well. And the next poster category is going to be historical, which means that the posters that I'm going to show I found in museums, which means they are from the past. Not the posters that advertise museums, but the posters that are in museums exhibited. So it's just a combination of all different kinds of posters. Just the fact that they are old and not modern. And sometimes I wouldn't understand what they were made for, but I could comment probably only on the visual part. And these first posters I'm going to show in this category are made during the period of underground culture in Tokyo, which was a very short period, the end of 1960s and the beginning of the 70s. So it's probably gonna show a lot of Japanese designs that were trying to go against the norm, heavily influenced by Western design, by American design practices. So this is just the brief overview. And these three posters are theatre posters. I love the collage style. They look a bit familiar to me because they remind me of punk posters again of the 60s and the 70s. So I guess that's not that typical for traditional Japanese, but very experimental. It shows that kind of punk and rebellious vibe. This is a Japanese version of a psychedelic style of the 60s. This is a music poster for a counterculture band. These are the event posters. Unfortunately, I couldn't really tell what kind of events they are promoting, even though I tried to translate. I didn't understand the context of it, but I love that graphic style and the maximalism. It is very visually rich and well organized. And another little element that I've noticed, not only here but also in other Japanese posters, that they like to use those dots, like bullet points, a lot. And sometimes those dots, they are really big circles, which look a lot darker and more noticeable than the text itself. But I think it's a really good, I think in case with the characters, it's a really good way to separate the words, because I'm not sure if they have blanks between the words, but even just like a visual element, it's really effective, I think, just to bring your attention to something rather than just a little dot that is not that noticeable. But with the Latin alphabet, we need to be careful about it. Sometimes if we would use such big circles with English language, sometimes it looks too much. This one shows a beautiful layering, is what we would call now a risoprint effect, but back then maybe it was the actual risoprint, I don't know. And also the playful composition makes it really fun and friendly, very smooth visual flow, and everything revolves around that main figure that we see in the center. And it's very dynamic as well. This is very flat and graphic, using the traditional Japanese illustration technique with gradients and outlines. I think it's an incredible job. I honestly don't have anything to criticize here. A lot of little details, but at the same time everything is connected. This is again very psychedelic, very similar to American version of psychedelic movement posters. The difference is just the characters, which are highlighted with the outline, just to make sure that they won't get lost, and it's really easy to get lost against such busy background. So I think that's a really smart way to separate them, but at the same time to fit them in the composition. I love the color contrast like that, when the tones are similar but the colors are very different, and it creates that again very acid and psychedelic effect. Also the layout is very creative and dynamic, so it's very much against the norm, I would say. This is another theater poster. Remind me of the Swiss style. It's also called international style, that depicts one central element, usually black and white photography, and the text is very minimal. So I guess it was heavily influenced by it, because it's also the 60s. And yeah, I think it works really well, despite it being very symmetrical. This is a theater poster again, very minimalist and simple, with some psychedelic elements in it. I love the colors, and on one hand we could think that they're not really connected, the right and the left side, but I see the connection by the line where the text ends, which repeats the same shape of the silhouette of the face on the right, which is a very subtle but very clever way to connect them together. So yeah, I really love how creative it is. Again, another theater poster, and putting all the text in those rectangular shapes reminds me of this modern trend of doing very similar thing, but the thing that makes it not modern is obviously the color scheme. Back then they didn't have any neon colors, but for those times it looks very, very progressive and creative to me. I also love the rhythm, repeating of the same bird 3 times. That definitely helps with the visual flow. So yeah, everything here is just so well thought. This one is very artsy and solely based on the illustration, which is really beautiful. I think that's a smart way, because sometimes you don't need text as much. The contrast is really high and it's intensified by this bright yellow, like yellow-greenish color, which I think it's really beautiful. And I've witnessed this color combination of these 3 colors of black, light gray and yellow-green in other Japanese posters as well. I think it might be related to the culture somehow, but yeah, I don't see this color combination a lot in the West. I might be wrong, but I think it's really effective and really high in contrast. This one is an exhibition poster, which is really bold and bright and screaming at you, but I absolutely love it. This gives me these punk vibes. I could definitely see it as a festival poster of modern days. Yeah, I think it's a great job done here. This one again is exhibition poster, and as you can see, they definitely used the shapes of characters as an illustration itself. It's just so emotional and it definitely screams at you. It's trying to say something. Sometimes it's enough and you don't need any illustrations or photography, especially if you know Japanese. That would massively help. But even without it, you can clearly feel the energy from this poster. A human without face, and the eye is placed on it in another part of the poster. This is for underground cinema, as you can see. And the text below doesn't really interfere with the main image, which is good for concentrating our attention on one thing. And overall, it's really minimal and effective and clear and just really nice to look at. Yeah, this is probably one of the other examples where I said that I saw that color combination of light gray, yellow, green and black. I think there is something very authentic here. I love the visual metaphor of mountain that kind of looks like tears from the eye. I think it's very poetic in that sense, and at the same time it's also very geometric in terms of the shapes of the objects and the text blocks. I love the traditional Japanese illustration style, which is very flat and full of black outlines. It's very 2D and focused on small details. And this is from another museum. The exhibition was focused on the history of ads in Japan, and this is one of the first examples in history. And even though you probably can't really tell, and me neither, what exactly is advertised here, but we can just appreciate the traditional Japanese graphic style, the illustration. I absolutely love it. It looks so authentic and traditional. Again, a very traditional Japanese illustration. But another interesting thing here is that the text is used like a wallpaper, and it's so graphic and so decorative and curvy that I'm not even sure if it's supposed to be read or it's just like a pattern behind it. It looks more like a decoration, which I think is beautiful. And this is, I guess, the beginning of the 20th century. It's a little bit more clear now what's been advertised. We can clearly see the product. It's a lot more detailed than the lady, which is blurred out a little bit. So I think it's very effective in terms of communication, but I still don't know what exactly this product is. But yeah, I just think it's a beautiful job in terms of composition and how this detailed object is supported by the detailed title on the right, so it's all balanced. And even the signature at the bottom kind of looks like it's meant to be there. This is one of the first Shiseido ads, which is the legendary cosmetic brand. And here we can see that it was really influenced by the Western advertising style, the Western poster design practice, probably by Americans, or maybe it was meant for international audience. This one, again, this is a very experimental for Japanese, I guess, looks more like avant-garde style of the 20th century that you can find across many other countries, which is very flat and illustrative. Again, it's even more flat. There's no gradient here at all and very minimal. I would say it's not really typical for Japanese, especially the color palette is so bright, which is something we wouldn't typically expect. This one is kind of similar. It's a very cartoonish style, but not like an anime cartoon, more like Western tradition, I would say. And this one is patriotic poster, military propaganda. During the war times, they tried to encourage people to celebrate the Army Day, which is, in my view, it's very playful for this kind of propaganda, but I guess it's Japanese style. And this one is, again, was made during the war times, during the food shortage. This poster is meant to encourage people to grow their own pumpkins. And I don't know, I think it looks very cheerful and uplifting. Yeah, maybe it will encourage me to grow a couple of pumpkins. Looks very attractive to me. This is another Shiseido ad. Very simple, natural face. At the same time, we can clearly see what kind of product that is. I guess it's a lipstick, and mostly based on photography, which is not really common in Japanese posters, especially of the 20th century, but I guess this is very progressive in that sense. This is a very avant-garde approach. I can definitely feel the Western influence on that poster design style, and it's especially interesting to see the combination of it with the Japanese typography, which is very, very geometric here. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting mix. This one's a bit more traditional, even though it kind of looks flat and digital, but at the same time traditional. So overall, I would say it's really effective in terms of communication and telling you what exactly you need to buy. It even says in English, if you wasn't sure. But yeah, I think it's a beautiful job. And a couple of old and more traditional Japanese style ads. Like this one was made after the Anglo-Japanese alliance was signed. And you can see the two flags here, Japanese and British. And this is such an intricate and delicate job of putting together all these tiny pieces of text. I really admire a person who did that. This is a New Year poster with the calendar on it. Like a poster within another poster. And look how empty the space on the left is, which is kind of wild, but at the same time it doesn't look wrong in a weird way. Well, maybe I would crop it a little bit, but not too much, because I think it's not a bad idea to support such a dense layout with some breathing space to balance it out. But maybe now I'm just not really used to it. I would definitely crop probably a half of that empty space, but I may be biased by the modern design practice. And the next category is going to be public information posters, something that I saw on the underground or an announcement of something, more like an informational. So let's take a look at the Japanese approach. And the first poster in this category is the instructions how to report a suspicious person who may cause harm. I think you can guess what kind of harm. And it's interesting how they use a very playful and cartoonish kind of style for these very serious topics. And I guess it's a good thing, because on the other hand, it makes it a lot more approachable and friendly. It makes people believe that they're being cared of and they're being supported. So I think it works out really well. And in terms of the layout, it's really clean and clear. And this is on a similar topic on how to prevent that bad behavior to happen on a train. This one takes a more serious approach. It's very strict, and composition wise it's also very effective, because the main title is highlighted by the emptiness from both sides, and I don't really know which approach works better, this one or more playful, but they serve different purposes. That one was more practical and like instructions. This is probably more to bring awareness, so maybe they're both needed, but I really like that friendly and warm approach of the previous one. And this is about lost items that you may accidentally drop on tracks. I guess they are saying that you shouldn't try to put them on after that, because it's dangerous, if I understood correctly. Again, as you can see, it's a very, very cartoonish style, something that we would call childish, but it's for adults and like for everyone. The color scheme is also very cheerful, like for kids, but this is just a different approach, and maybe like a cultural thing that in Japan it's used everywhere, not only for kids. And I really like it, to be honest. It just makes everything more friendly, but why not? This is a warning poster which says, when using escalators, please be careful when handling your luggage. This could lead to an unexpected serious accident. This is a more serious style poster. But another thing that I really love here is how the type is stretched. Have you noticed that? Even those circles that are supposed to be circles now, like awkward shapes of ovals. So yeah, Japanese designers don't always follow rules. Actually, pretty rarely they do follow rules. And what are the rules? Who decides on them? That's a different question. This is about rushing on a train, which says a really wise thing, not to rush anywhere, because that might be dangerous. And notice that, again, very childish, cartoonish style, but it's really effective and it's being used everywhere in Japan. This is a Family Mart employee recruitment poster, which is a local convenience store, one of the most common ones across the country. And as you can see, they stretched a lot of text, which looks surprisingly creative and even trendy now in terms of aesthetics. But I suspect that might be a little bit distracting from reading the actual text. So I'm not sure about that stretching thing that it works here, at least considering the purpose of this poster. This is a warning poster. A purse snatching occurred in this area recently, and advise how to prevent that happening in the future. Osaka Prefecture Police. Again, this childish style makes it look more friendly. I don't know, I would feel like somebody takes care of me. They are trying to prevent that happen. So I really like that approach, to be honest. I feel supported. And the last category is going to be other posters, which is something that I didn't come up with any particular category, or most of these posters are just something I don't know exactly what they are advertising, or I don't know what to group them with. And this is just an overload of everything: colors, text, pictures, and this is just genius. I don't know, I may be influenced by trends, by maximalism. I may be subjective on that. And some people may say it's ugly, but I don't know, I love this style. I'm not sure how clear it is in terms of communication, but I would assume if you look at this poster for too long, and if you look at it like one area at a time, it's probably effective in its communication. I would assume that. I want to believe that. And this is a modern version of Shiseido ads. I wanted to emphasize the use of the outlines here, which is in Western countries would probably be considered as something very childish and too playful, and we probably wouldn't use that for a luxury cosmetic brand. But in Japan, I guess they look at it differently, and this is a very normal thing to do because they use these outlines everywhere. They are a lot more common. And this is a really cute, another recruitment poster, surprisingly. It says high paying part-time job. I'm wondering what kind of job they are promoting, but I would love to see that on a boring building somewhere. I think it just makes it look a lot friendlier and nicer to live in. And I don't really know what these ones are promoting, but I just appreciate the maximalism, the outlined typography, the illustrations, anime. I think it all looks just beautiful in its style. And this one is another version of a poster that I showed you in another category about the exhibition in that Mirror Museum, but this one is purely based on typography. I just think it's a really good example of how simple typography can look very interesting on its own without images or photography, because it's a very tricky thing to do to make it look actually interesting. So I would easily imagine that on my wall. Like, I would be happy to have this on my wall, to be honest. So why not? And this one says stop the child. That's what my translator said. I don't know what exactly it prevents people from. I guess it's a warning poster. But the interesting thing is the style, like how wild and experimental that is for just a regular underground poster. So I wish I could see a lot more so bright and saturated posters like this on regular streets or public spaces. And this one is just so weird and chaotic that I love it. Absolutely love it, to be honest. This is very close to anti-design, like when everything is so different, but somehow it all works out. I don't know how to explain it, and that's how it's genius, because you can't really tell from the first glance what exactly works out here. But I don't know, it just makes me smile. And this is a dental clinic ads, which is perfect match, I guess, that it makes me smile. This is probably the most cheerful poster that I've seen. I'm not saying that it's a masterpiece of graphic design, but in a way it is. I think it's either a club or a restaurant or karaoke club maybe, but just the visual overload, like the text is always dancing here, and I think it's an amazing job, honestly, how playful, how fun it is. Yeah, I think it's great. And one more category that I would like to include is book cover design. Even though it's not poster design, it's still related to it because we can see each book cover as a mini poster, which is meant to attract us to buy this book. So it kind of counts. And of course, I was really curious to explore Japanese approach to it. First off, I just noticed that Japanese often let the typography be the star, with type dominating the layout. It's bold, freely positioned, varied in size and style, sometimes used asymmetrically or vertically. Western covers typically prioritize the image or brand, keeping the text minimal and centered. The second thing I've noticed is unconventional composition / asymmetry. Many covers feel unbalanced on purpose, whereas we know that Western design often chases clean layouts, and Japanese covers embrace imperfection and visual interest. The third thing I've noticed is playful and hand-drawn elements. Handwritten titles and text blocks, doodles, sketches, or cartoon-like elements, like we saw the same tendency in posters. Whimsical, playful illustrations are used next to serious topics. Western covers usually separate serious and playful styles visually. Japanese design is often happy to mix both. The fourth thing is just the amount of text. Tons of text, often in multiple blocks. Western design usually avoids clutter, but here the layering of information feels purposeful. The fifth thing is bright and unexpected color choices. Lots of hot pinks, neons, and pastel colors, of course. Oftentimes those colors are flat, without any harsh gradients. The sixth thing is the use of visual labels and stickers, which is really trendy now actually. Some covers feature highlighted boxes, then the imitation of stickers or labels, arrows or instruction icons. These are usually real elements or overlays meant to make books feel interactive and useful. And the seventh thing, I already touched on that, is illustration over photography. Illustration is very common in Japanese book cover design, even for adult non-fiction. And when photography is used, it's often cropped in odd ways, layered with text or textures, and treated as a part of graphic system. And as we know, Western design relies heavily on clean photography. And to summarize all the designs that we've covered today, I found 8 key distinctive features of Japanese design, specifically poster design. And the first one is, as you probably guess, it's maximalism. Posters are often filled to the edges, packed with text, images, boxes, and colors. There's rarely a single focal point, and your eye jumps around the layout a lot. I guess this creates a sense of energy, abundance, and chaos in a good way. The second thing is outlined bold typography. Yeah, I saw these outlines everywhere, which in Western design is not that typical unless you're doing something playful for kids, something non-serious. The third thing is the amount of hand-drawn and handwritten elements. Whether it's a food poster or a book cover, there's often a human imperfect touch, which is what I absolutely love in the age of AI. It's so much needed. Handwritten notes, brush strokes, doodles, and sketch-like illustrations always add more character and warmth. The fourth thing is flat, playful illustration style. Illustration is everywhere, often 2D, simple, and expressive. And this helps even serious topics feel accessible and friendly. The fifth thing is bright and pastel color palettes. There's a love for pastels, neon pinks, bright yellows, and soft blues. Those are the most common ones that I've noticed. And dark and moody palettes are rare. Most posters feel light, fun, and welcoming, even when the design is dense. The sixth thing is unpredictable and playful layouts. Asymmetry is common. Elements feel collaged, layered, or floating, and grid systems are loose and flexible. Some posters feel like they're breaking the rules of Western design, and it's done on purpose. The seventh feature is a cultural mix of old and new, which is really interesting. Many posters blend traditional Japanese aesthetics, like brush calligraphy for example, with modern styles, from clean sans serifs to loud graphic elements. This layering of history plus modernity gives them a distinctive voice. And the eighth thing I've noticed is just the general approach of treating text as design, not just as content. Japanese posters treat type as visual material, not just words to be read. It's arranged to create rhythm, movement, and visual texture. You'll often see vertical and horizontal text combined, multiple font sizes in one block, or entire layouts made from type. So to sum up, I would say the Japanese graphic design doesn't really follow Western rules, and that's exactly why it's so inspiring. It's bold, dense, playful, sometimes weird, but always full of life. I hope this gave you some fresh ideas to try in your own design, whether it's playing with color, type, or just being a little more chaotic on purpose. Let me know in the comments which poster or design detail stood out to you the most. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you liked this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, especially if you want more content like this. I've got more cool stuff coming up, and thank you so much for watching. See you next time.